I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation on whose land we meet today. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and also to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. So good afternoon, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kim Kellaway and I'm ex-clients Judd. On behalf of our ENFP Strategic Alliance, which is HLB Mann, Judd and Bank, we welcome our guests today and introduce our not-for-profit Leaders Report on Financial Management for 2023. Firstly, though, I'd like to thank everyone in the room and those members that actually participated in the survey. I know that surveys can sometimes be a bit painful and they take time, but this is certainly a robust report. There's some great information in there and it will allow you to benchmark your organisation among others. We also have today some incredible guest speakers. So our first guest speaker will be Damien Smith. We have Marcus Zeltzer, who's the co-founder of Yellow Canary, but who we also have here today is Chip Hoebeke. Chip is a partner at Rehamann, which is a very large accounting and advisory firm in the States. So just a little bit about Damien. So Damien Smith is the founder and managing partner of ENterprisecare. Damien's portfolio includes board chair and industry committee roles, speaker, author, publisher, lecturer, advisor, and having a great passion for governance and healthy organisations. As founder of ENterprisecare and healthy organisation government strategist, Damien is passionate about empowering boards, executives and organisations in optimising their performance and positive impact. Marcus Zeltzer is one of Australia's experts on the future of automation's role in payroll compliance, pursuing his passion of solving real-world business problems with technology. Marcus co-founded Yellow Canary to address underserviced and widespread workforce compliance issues in Australian businesses. Prior to Yellow Canary, Marcus co-founded an employment relations law firm built on automation technology and ran a company that delivered critical skills training to organisations going through transformation change. Chip, we know a little bit about Chip. Chip has been at Rehamann for more than 22 years. He heads up the consulting division for that firm. He is responsible for the business valuation, litigation support, mergers and acquisitions, and corporate investigational service lines. He is also the leader of the firm's turnaround and restructuring practice. So with that out of the way, I think we will commence our presentation with Aidan Smith, who will run through the results and the findings of the survey and then present managing clients. Thank you, Aidan.
Thank you, Kim. Good afternoon, all. All right, so I'm going to talk initially about the main findings, and then I'll talk a little bit about big finance. So this is just kind of the intro, right? This is the entree, if you like. What the report will say, there's lots more information in the report. That'll be the main course. So the sweetness is the advantages that you take from the report, apply them to your organisation. So, main findings. Current economic environment is affecting 55% of organisations' planned cash reserve levels. So, fees, as we talked about. Under 31% looking to outsource some of their finance function. 18% looking to grow the headcount of their finance team next year. 64% have seen an increase in revenue over the last 2 years. More than 55% looking to raise prices for the next 2 years. Last 12 months, 83% of respondents have seen an increase in wages. The average increase being 6%. Lastly, more than 64% were not concerned about the historical application or interpretation of payroll reports. Not yet. So, managing finances. What we've got. So we've done this is the third year we've done this survey. So if you're doing the survey and you're reading it, you get a bit of deja vu, going, have I done this before? So, yes, you have. Different survey. Some of the questions we do year to year. Some reported trends. Some are new. So 2021, the pandemic was still all around us. 2022, there were some economic changes happening. I was a bit unsure. COVID was over. And the There's still some economic challenges. 2033 are those, we see those economic challenges now. I think we all face them in our organisations. All looking at and going, "Ooh, how do we deal with this?" And this survey will deal some of those that we're seeing. So we asked, is your financial been affected by these external economic conditions that we're experiencing just now? Not surprisingly, only 6% said that it's positive. The majority, 52%, said negative, and 42% said not at all. So, right, so we have people saying that it has been impacted negatively. Yet we've asked, okay, has your revenue grown in the last 2 years? 64% said the revenue had grown. And are you budgeting a surplus over the next 12 months? Only 45% said they were. So let's go to the next question. So we've got, are you looking to raise your prices in the next 2 years? 54% said they were looking. 46% said no. Now what we see the challenge with that, and discussed with many of our clients, is how do you do that? It's raising prices. You don't just say, oh, we're increasing prices by 10%, away you go. You've got to communicate to market. You've got to have a strategy. You've got to make sure that you've got to test what the market will accept, what your competitors doing, have some modelling, financial modelling set up so you can test that and say, okay, if we increase our prices by this, but we lose X% of our customers, what's the impact on that? It's very important that you do that. And then when we said with interesting 46% saying they're not planning to increase their prices next year. Now, diversifying products, with 59% saying they want to plan to diversify the products, which one of the ways of increasing the revenue. And one of the things that's interesting when you look at this is what the people in this room will be a PBI, public benevolent institution. The AT was granted that status, and that's great from a tax perspective. However, the risk with diversifying your products or services, so you might be starting to do things that are not in your constitution for what you were granted that PBI status for. So what does that mean? That if the ACNC do a review, and the ACNC are doing a lot more reviews now, and we remember the ACNC Advisor Forum, and they've got a much bigger budget. They're very friendly when they come out to charities and find out quite good. But if they find something that's wrong with the tax, then they might not be quite as friendly as the ACNC. So it's very important with that diversification. It's great that people are looking at it, the majority are looking at it to say, okay, let's see if we can get other income streams. But it's very important to make sure diversifying stuff beyond what your constitution says you can do when you granted that PBI status. So ACNC or ATO. Right, so we had the one going back here. Are you looking to raise your prices? 54% said yes. Then we said, okay, who has raised their prices in the last couple of years? And 45% said they had, but 55% said no. And then when we asked those who had increased, we found that about half did by CPI, under half more than CPI, less than CPI was 10%. Now, that all goes back to when we look at this one, saying the revenue is growing, but the budget, the surplus where we were planning is actually the thing that's going to go down. Financial performance being impacted, negative. So what's this saying? A lot of us are increasing the prices, but financially it's not been a great impact. What we're seeing is that although people are increasing their prices, there's some increasing more by CPI, that the cost, the pressure of the cost increases. So people are trying to diversify, they're trying to increase the prices. CPI, less than CPI or at CPI, but it's still, the costs are going up more than that. So it is having a bit of an impact on organisations. And that is, it's a struggle. When you see a 55%, it's a 55% forecasting a deficit. That one? Yeah, surplus, yeah, so 55% forecasting a deficit over the next 12 months. Well, if you're not increasing prices, you've got these inflation impacts, what's happening? You have to cut people, you have to cut services, which makes it tough, especially with the demand for services is rising. We also asked a question about cash reserves. Who's got cash reserves? Who's got enough cash reserves? And we got comments, 36% have at least 12 months, and 69% saying they've at least 6 months or over. Now, with deficits, we're talking about deficits, forecast increasing majority, those cash reserves are getting more and more important. You won't have those cash reserves. Deficits continue, expected to increase, then you might have a problem going forward. So, things there for you to think about. Don't want to all be doom and gloom. That's my job. Yeah, it's your job. Yeah, it's not all doom and gloom. Here we are. It's Funny,
Clouds on the horizon.
Right, so what I'm going to do is I've been going, but Damien here has got some great information on board remuneration. So Damien, it's over to you to cheer up the room.
Thank you very much, Aidan. Boardroom or board remuneration is the most important and relevant topic at this time. What we've seen, particularly in the advisory services that we provide, is that there's quite a few boards that are now saying, well, how do we attract our members, or how do we attract the right mix of directors onto our board? And of course, the recent AGMs that have been held have highlighted that as they've gone through to seek nominations or seek people's interest in becoming a director. And it's also far more acceptable to talk about board remuneration than it was in the past. So it's moved from the water cooler to the board table. And I'd like to just reflect on the historical aspect of not-for-profit boards. So historically, they've depended upon volunteers. Volunteers don't have any financial compensation, and they're driven by commitment to an organisation's mission and its purpose, and they have a lot of passion. One aspect, though, that I will call out is that a number of boards would call their directors volunteers and also then pay either a per diem or an honorarium. Now, I particularly call that out because in our recent survey that we did in the not-for-profit sector, quite a number of boards highlighted that they pay an honorarium. But both in our consulting work and also in the data we were receiving, there were quite a number of boards who were paying their directors over $10,000 and yet still calling it an honorarium. And I think that that might be a question mark if the tax office took a closer look at the dollars that were being paid. On the boards I've referred to as the future, these are some of the considerations that they're challenged by. So there's changing expectations of the role of the director and the boards. It's become far, far more professional, and the broader expectations of the community on what the directors will do and their commitment to organisations is certainly growing. There's an emphasis on attracting a diverse talent to the boards, and I'm seeing that with work that I'm doing with boards in the not-for-profit sector, the composition of the boards. There's also a balancing of the considerations from an ethical point of view that's necessary. The legal and regulatory environment, I think any director would say, is just getting more complex and challenging. And board performance and accountability is something that's become far more acceptable among not-for-profit boards. And finally, the transparency and public perception is something that's growing. Communities are far more interested in what boards do. Just very quickly, on the left-hand side, there's 58% of the respondents would classify themselves as traditional charity, 16% association membership organisation, 6% social enterprise, and 20% in the other, including foundations and companies limited by guarantee. I won't go through the list on the right-hand side, but it's relevant to see just the breadth and depth of coverage of not-for-profits throughout our society. And this is not a comprehensive list. There's others that have been that just didn't fit on the slide. So out of that, the not-for-profits boards or committees of management, if they're an association incorporated under state legislation, basically 75% of the boards have between 6 to 10 directors. And that's particularly relevant if you're looking at a compensation or remuneration for your boards, but it's a lot of people also that you're seeking to come onto your board as a collective. So if you multiply that by the number of not-for-profits in Australia, which stretches well over 100,000 organisations, then it's a lot of people that you're looking to attract to your board, and of course the relevant competencies. In terms of the issues, I've simply divided between the positives and the negatives when considering remuneration. I think one of the drivers is to fairly compensate those directors for work done. We've probably all heard or said, look, I just don't have the time to devote. I can't allocate it because I've got other priorities. Or CEOs saying, and I've heard this regularly, I don't want to call upon Director X because I know that they're not being paid for it and they're busy doing other things. And that can actually have a negative impact on the organisation. The other one is attracting more experienced board members. So you're messaging professionalism, and I know that payment, it doesn't necessarily equate to professionalism, but it does help. The other aspect goes to every director now has got a commitment to upgrading their skills and experience. Governance is not a static thing. It's really a professional commitment, and the ongoing continuing professional development is something that's necessary. I think any of us in the room would recognise the commitment that we make. And the last one that's I've called out on the left-hand side is it encourages diversity by paying people. And this is a significant issue. And not everybody who you would like to attract to your board can afford to attend board meetings unless they are paid. So that's a factor that needs to be considered. On the right-hand side, the negatives might well be the status quo is providing good results, although I'm finding as I talk to various boards that it's getting harder and harder to attract people to the board, and even in the nominations process, they're falling short. The other one is it's uncertain how to establish and or manage board remuneration. So a number of directors don't know where to start. The boards aren't sure. There's also concerns around benchmarking. So it's benchmarking on a remuneration basis. What if we find out we have to pay our boards? I'd rather not know. Or as in the last call out point there is being wary of a linkage to board performance and even director reviews. So we find that there is a reluctance at times because there's an acknowledgement that it would be good to connect the two, that if we do have board remuneration, then we should also have board performance and director reviews. In terms of the directors that are remunerated, the report shows that 79% don't pay their directors, and it's probably linked to the traditional charity area. The chair only, 4%, chair and select directors, 3%, and all directors, 13%. So what it does also show is even if you do have board remuneration, it may not be for all directors. It may be only selected as the slide indicates. For those who are remunerated, the responses show that 79% were paid at less than 5,000, up to 61,000 plus dollars were being paid to 3% of the responses. And I dare say that higher percentage, the higher value would be for the chairs of the organisations. And we're also finding that more and more not-for-profit boards are prepared to go outside their own groups to look for professional chairs because they acknowledge that a good chair of a board can make a significant difference to the operations of the board. Just in terms of the Enterprise Care's latest financial, for the financial year 24, we found from the group of boards that responded, 27% are paying their chairs. And in directors' situation, 29% are being paid, and that can include the committee chairs as well. The minimum for a chair is $3,885 to a maximum of $176,691. And a minimum for a director is $2,220 up to $106,014. I won't go through this in detail, but the top line shows why there is a need to consider and in many cases make remuneration payments to boards. Time and effort. There is an elastic demand now on directors' time. I had a board meeting this morning and they recognised just call a meeting in between if we need to do X, Y or Z. So this notion of being now on call, I think has resonated with many boards and directors. The ongoing education I mentioned earlier, keeping up to date is a full time, if you like. It's a total commitment on personal, a person who wants to be a director and wants to do the right thing. We're operating in a VUCA world, a world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity, and that's meant that we've actually got to keep up to date with whether it's environmental, cyber security, privacy or what have you. On the liability risk exposure, well, we all have personal accountability on a legal basis, whether we're a volunteer or paid director. However, I think what's emerging and has emerged, and we've seen this in particular in the commercial world, is a moral responsibility. If something goes wrong, then somebody's got to, at a board level or a CEO level, has to pay the price for it. Whether you're legally liable or not, you are morally, if you like, responsible for what's occurred, therefore you ought to resign. And we're seeing that play out, certainly publicly in a number of commercial areas. The last one on that part is the sense of growth of the unknowns. In talking with boards these days, you'll find many directors saying, well, I'm just not sure now. The clarity and the certainty isn't there for me that I would have had 12 months or certainly pre-COVID. The world is now topsy-turvy. And the last one is the value add. I think directors are searching to become real stewards of their organisation, and the work that we're doing is focusing on organisational health, particularly around having leading indicators for the boards rather than their reliance on lagging indicators. The last one here is from the survey. Of those unpaid, are the boards planning to review? And there's 4%. I would think that in a few years' time, that would be in double figures of those who aren't paying, because the pressure is on all organisations to consider the payment to ensure that they've got the relevant board. Just as in terms of, as part of the ENFP community, a special offer that we make through our remuneration portal that's just been released, you can get access to that. There's a discount code there that you can actually apply, and to have an up-to-date. Just as an aside, what we've found is that there is a real disconnection now with the market in a number of organisations keeping pace with aligning their salaries to what's occurring in the marketplace across a raft of different positions. Thank you. And now to a special report from Marcus. Thank you.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm going to take you through a couple of perspectives on payroll compliance, which has become a hot topic in the last couple of years. So just to give you a bit of background, I'm the founder of Canary. Because I was the first employee, I got to choose my own job title, and I thought managing director had a nice ring to it. Little did I know what managing directors actually had to do every day. Over the last couple of years, we've got a purpose-built platform that calculates wages, entitlements, super and long service leave. Over the last couple of years, we've done 90 wage remediation projects, processed $67 billion worth of payroll data, and on an ongoing basis, we look after about 150,000 employees every month. We check that they've been paid appropriately. So I want to talk about the Closing the Loopholes bill. And I must stress that it is a bill at this point, and it still has to go through the Senate, and it is constantly changing. For those that don't live in payroll compliance land like I do, you may not have noticed that last night there was actually an amendment that was agreed to the bill to include superannuation in the criminal sanctions work stream within the proposed legislation. I spent a lot of time talking to folks about payroll compliance, and I just want to touch on the bill for 1 second here. Chances are, if you are in this room and you're listening to me speak, you are not going to end up in the criminal sanctions part of the bill, right? I think there's a lot of fear that's going on, that's been spread around, and that there's this view that directors and officers are going to be summarily dragged from their workplace and taken to prison or jail. Prison, I think it is. You need to prove, under the way the bill's drafted at the moment, you need to prove criminal intent. So that is a systematic pattern of underpayment that's supposed to deprive people of their entitlements. So We'll talk about the serious contraventions component of the proposed legislation in a sec, because that is actually probably more pertinent to this audience. So when we look at the survey results, about half of the respondents aren't particularly concerned about payroll compliance. About a quarter are unsure and about a quarter are really concerned. Interestingly, of the folks that have identified as being concerned, 77% of them have already done a payroll, yet they remain concerned. And half, you start to get a little bit too many statistics in this, but of the people that said that they weren't concerned, only half of those had done. So it's the old absence of evidence may not necessarily be an evidence of absence. So I think, to put it into context, of that $67 billion worth of payroll that we've reviewed, we have not found a single employer that didn't have wage underpayments. Not one. We live in hope that one day we will find one, but it's not, we haven't seen one. And to put into context, some of our clients are the largest employers in the country. They've gone through large-scale remediation exercises, spent tens of millions of dollars on payroll infrastructure and on consultants. And at the end of all of that, they are still coming up with underpayments on a monthly basis. So I would suggest that you may well be, if you're not concerned about payroll compliance, you may well be the one employer that doesn't happen. The system's really complex. It's interrelated. And what we'll get to is that the technology just doesn't keep up with the complexities of the system. I think the thing to note about the proposed legislation in closing loopholes is actually the fines. So the fines at the moment, the maximum fine is $2 million under the Fair Work Act. Under the proposed legislation, it's going to be 3 times the underpayment. It's going to be the ceiling. So to put it into context, when the Red Cross announced publicly that they'd underpaid employees to the tune of $20, under the new legislation, they would not only have to back pay the $25 million of entitlements, but also pay a $75 million on top of that. In 2023, the Fair Work Ombudsman recovered $509 million of underpayments to employees. That's in 1 year, $500 million. That's $1.5 billion of maximum fines. And this is not where you require criminal intent to meet that burden. It just has to be, it has to classify as a serious contravention. Sorry, I've been accused of being a demotivational consultant. I'm just trying to give you the information that's there. So when we look at compliance audits, they mean lots of different things to lots of different people. But about half of the respondents had said that they've done an audit and half hadn't. Of those who have not done an audit, about 2/3 of them are suggesting that they rely on their payroll infrastructure to provide them with compliance. And 3/4 of them felt confident that their systems are up to date, despite never having done an audit. Payroll infrastructure, so rostering, time and attendance, employee master file, and payroll systems are all designed with one thing in mind, that is to get payment into somebody's pocket. We're all here, we all get paid because of payroll. It's not designed with continual compliance in mind. It's designed to look at the demand for labour, set a roster, publish the roster, get people to work to the roster, account for their time, and make a payment for them. And a lot of the audit work that's done in the market is actually what's called a configuration file review. So it's a review of pay codes to determine whether somebody is owed 150% loading, that 150% loading actually gets applied to their base rate of pay. Where we see this, especially in the not-for-profit space, go horribly wrong is where you have these things called self-claim systems, where employees are on auto pay, they get paid their ordinary hours, and they have a mechanism for claiming hours outside of. And you might have one pay code that's 150% overtime penalty, overtime rate, and another pay code that's 150% penalty rate. And employees are booking their time to overtime when they should be booking it to the shift penalty. Now, at 150%, it's even, but one of them requires superannuation to be paid and the other one doesn't. And as of last night, due to the Pococks, unrelated, Barbara and David, superannuation will now be incorporated into the legislation. Talk about audits. Continue to talk about audits. So of those who have undertaken an audit, about 70% of them have done it through third parties and the balance have done it through internal teams. Unfortunately, nobody has used technology to do that. Obviously, I'm pushing my own barrow here to talk about the benefits of technology, but to put into context, our platform has 400 error checks that it undertakes on data before it even applies a calculation to it. So again, one of the tests with the audits is how do you get full coverage? How do you review every employee, every entitlement, every pay period so that you actually get comfort? Of the reviews that we've done, the 90 payroll reviews that we've done, the average underpayment sits between 1% and 3% of payroll. So it's not actually that much. So the complexity actually sits in the margin. The stuff that's easy to calculate is very rarely an area of profits. So again, you have to look at every entitlement. So when we look at systems, we asked respondents about confidence in their systems being able to stay up to date with legislation, and 77% said that they were sure, and 17% unsure, and 6% no. In 2020, the SHADS Award, which a lot of folks in this room will be unfortunately, acutely aware of, changed 3 times. On top of that, you have courts of competent jurisdiction making decisions about how you're supposed to interpret the terms of the award. For example, in the General Retail Industry Award, there is no definition of what a regular Saturday is. Is it 32 Saturdays a year? Is it 20? Is it 50%? And so you have to actually go to the common law to actually look at what the common law says and interpret it. And again, we have clients that we work with that have spent 9 figures on their payroll infrastructure. They've got the best of breed systems at every step of the way to support workforces in excess of 100,000 employees, and they still can't keep up with the legislation. So I think payroll compliance is really important for the not-for-profit sector. I think it's important for everybody who has an employee. But again, maintaining trust with your stakeholders and avoiding penalties, which ultimately, if the legislation passes as drafted, will have serious solvency issues for employers across the board, and fostering transparency. And I could talk for hours about how to do it, but effectively, at a really high level, teams have to talk to each other. Oftentimes, rosters get created in isolation without reference to the rules. So getting workforce planning, payroll, in-house or external legal, and your advisors talking to each other is really important. And as we've seen with a whole bunch of different bits of legislation, it's moving from a reactive approach to a positive obligation. So you've got to shift from reactive to proactive. And obviously, I always say that automation is the best approach, but because it's such a complicated subject matter, and the only way to ensure compliance is actually re-entitle it for every employee for a period. So ran through that at a great rate of knots. Once you've had a chance to consume the content of the report, if you want to have a chat about it, let me know. Thanks to COVID, where QR codes are back, so you can scan that one, and I'm happy to chat. Now over to Fiona to talk about technology.
Useful coming off the back of that. So I'm going to talk about the technology findings from the not-for-profit leaders report. Firstly, we asked technology that they currently use consistent in their finance and operations. As you can see, 95% said that they're currently using cloud-based software. This is now the go-to solution for most businesses. and it helps to improve efficiency, as you would all be aware of. Respondents noted that just under half of their finance processes were automated, which is quite similar to our 2022 findings. And cloud software is now the foundation. If you've implemented your cloud-based general ledger system, what else can you look at? So 9% of respondents said that they're using, only 9%, so quite a low number, using OCR or optical character recognition. The beauty of this technology for those that don't use it is it can read PDFs and it can read documents, and it can then input that information into your general ledger system. So it revolutionises accounts payable. Even if you don't have a big accounts payable, I would expect that number to be a lot higher. Maybe the best way of saying that. If you're using programs like Xero, MIB, they have DEX, Data Molino, that can easily do that for a fairly cost-effective price. In addition, RPA, or process automation, it's my favourite topic, can significantly assist with automating your processes. No respondents are currently using this technology. Generally, we find organisations can be put off by the perceived investment or the perceived costs involved. There are now lower cost options available through Microsoft. So Microsoft, if you have a Microsoft 365, you get the Power Automate Desktop, Power Automate already included in your package. It's called low code or no code, which basically means anyone use it. You do not need to be a programmer or IT. This year, because it's the hot topic and the buzzword, we asked about artificial intelligence or AI. 84% of respondents noted they had little understanding of AI and its applications. It's understandable. I think in a previous profit, I asked about ChatGPT, and although a lot of people have heard about it, no one had actually been using it. AI is a broad term that refers to a lot of the technology seek to mimic human behaviour. They learn from large amounts of data, that they find patterns and predict answers to questions. It's already a huge part of our lives. Netflix recommends shows, Amazon recommends deals that are feeling in the Black Friday sales based on your recent purchasing history. You have it with Google predicting news stories that you might find interesting, ads put in your browser, whether you use Google, Alexa, Siri, or AI. We saw in the last year the large language models come out, which has really changed quite a lot. So whether that's Google Bard or ChatGPT, and then DALL-E is an image generator, which is created by OpenAI as well. There's a lot of talk about AI. I thought it might be useful just to talk about the difference between generative AI and traditional or analytical AI. Generative AI is ChatGPT. So McKinsey summarises it well. They are powered by artificial training models, so they've trained on broad sets of data. They include inputs of the analytical AI into it, and then it can be used to generate, that's the name, outputs, whether it's documents, images, programming code, audio conversations. You can even get it to record yourself, and it can sound like you, and it can fool actually other people that it's really your voice in different applications. Which I think is quite scary, but I'm sure someone has a use for it. Interestingly, it doesn't create, rather it predicts what a human will enjoy. So humans create, AI predicts. Unlike traditional analytical AI, it can't calculate or do maths. So if you ask ChatGPT or Google Bard a maths question, it will generally get it wrong. And so rely on your calculator for that one. In the survey, we also asked different questions about AI and different statements and whether people agreed. Most agreed that it was here to stay and that it would have a positive impact on their day-to-day work and organisations. Given not surprisingly, many people didn't had little understanding of AI. And they do not believe they have the necessary skills or budget to implement AI solutions. With automation, there are low-cost solutions and AI tools available. ChatGPT has a version that is free and is trained on data possibly up to 2021, if not later. There is a paid version as well. If you have Microsoft, you can get Bing Chat Enterprise, which is available to Microsoft plans E3 and E5, and that is it uses ChatGPT 4, so the latest model, so you get it for free, and it's considered to be less prone to hallucinations, less likely to make stuff up, and also safer in the responses it provides. So benefits of Bing Chat Enterprise as opposed to ChatGPT. The data isn't saved. You put in there that Microsoft isn't able to access any of that data, and the chat data that you use isn't used to train any underlying models. How can you use it? Some examples of how you could use AI. You can ask it to draft an email for you. If you draft an email or a report, whatever, you can ask it to change the tone. I particularly love. So you can get it to have a more professional tone or a more engaging tone or a friendly tone, anything at all like that. Even just have it go and see what it can do. It's quite funny. You can get it to be funny. You can get it to talk like a pirate and provide all the responses in a line. You can ask it to help draft marketing or write an article for you. You could start a report. You can interpret stuff for you. The list is endless. I guess it's just looking at it and seeing, even if it saves 15, 20 minutes, one task, it's 15 or 20 minutes that you can do something else or go home early. And then finally, we asked about percentage of positions in your organisation that currently require technology and innovation skills as part of job descriptions. We can see that there's a real link here. So although majority of the respondents said that currently they're not requiring these skills, you may not require it, and it may not be or needed, but it could be a desirable. So even if you don't have the skills at the moment, why not add it as desirable so you can invest in this sort of technology or free up time. Some skills that is recommended: technology, innovation, critical thinking, intellectual curiosity, creativity, big one. And this can start setting you up with a talent pool that you can help transform. I'll now pass you over to Chief Todd to go through this.
ChatGPT, my presentation right here.
You borrowed?
So we're going a little bit rogue. We're not going to go too much into detail. We're going to go through a couple of other things. First of all, from what I've heard, why are you surprised? This guy's always go rogue. So I think the board remuneration, I think the big answer of that is that joining people who I know on boards is the risk and the uncertainty and unknown and the professional exposure that you go into going on those boards. I think that's the money is irrelevant for them. It's more about getting onto a board and having that risk exposure and having hiccups. But as everybody's corporate governance improves, I think that will happen for people going from the professions. I think that will help bring through the change that Damien was talking about. In terms of underpayments, from my point of view, I see a lot of it. 3 million, I think, unpaid super is the biggest one. PAYG 5 million unpaid plus wages on top of that. So it's pretty much where we sort of run. I think the new bill, lawyers will make an absolute fortune trying to interpret what that all means, and we'll have case law forever until we land somewhere. And that's going to be the biggest risk. And I think you probably missed the most obvious one, who's the first. Because I assume you guys don't have a wage underpayment.
We actually missed a super payment once because we had an employee start on the 30th of June. And so we had to
Miss the day.
We had a $20 superannuation underpayment that cost $160 to close out.
He's perfect.
Yeah, so we do eat our own dog food and we give our Generate the statement.
So, all right, we've moved through. So, Chip and I have done a few presentations doing about different things. He brings a very international aspect to it. I'm a little bit more focused on the local area. Seen sort of everything you can to see in restructuring, good stuff, bad stuff in between. I'll do his in his introduction every time. He's the only guy I know who's been shot at on a job.
True. Boy shootings and projects over the years. I haven't been hit yet though.
So what do we see? The current major risks outside of cyber and all of those things. Cost of living is a major risk because it causes people to do other things. It drives them to create other scenarios. It's apparent to me doing a Chip. In America, there is a very big gap at the gaps at the bottom and the top. So in America, I would say this is probably even more stark than what it is here now.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely, I think it probably is best, you know, as we see through COVID, we saw wealth shift. And didn't shift down, it shifted up. You know, the gap between it went further and further, and just it's driving behavior, desperation. And, you know, you see that in so many nonprofits. My wife just graduated here at University in Sydney this week, and she focuses on dealing with extraordinarily troubled women, you know, 3 or 4 stints in jail and prison. And it's just, you know, you can see regular people at one point in life who have made choices out of desperation, out of a lack of hope, you know, out of just, you know, they see things in social media, they see things on TV, it's just untouchable, and they make other choices. And they spend their life trying to fix this.
That's where fraud comes in. This is the fraud period. We talk about it now where the tide's going out, and we're definitely seeing in what we do where there are a lot of people who are caught by the tide and don't have any clothes on. And just coming out. You know, we'll see more of it in the next phase as well. All of these sort of issues get swept under when the economy's good, when the economy starts to slow down. That also results in the other unintended factor here is inability to for the services, which seems like something everybody goes, well, can't you just make sure you can do that? But if you don't have the right people and you can't get the right resources and stock and all of those things to be able to do all of that, all of a sudden it can become very wobbly, particularly if you've got new contracts or you lose key people at the wrong time and all of that. That's the wine, isn't it? And that's one of those things that can destabilise a business very quickly, because as soon as you can't deliver a service, your clients start to worry about you, and then they start making decisions they have to, because they have to run their own risk management. It becomes a very slippery pole. And then there's all of these other perception and social media driven issues, which is big here at the moment. We all know what's happening in the Middle East, and then there's the flow and effects on social media about how people are dealing with it. But that is a material issue.
It's crazy. So you have a gang problem on Market Street, according to the U.S. news and media. There's apparently been 2 gang-related crimes at some point in the past on Market Street. And so if you pay attention to mainstream American media, Sydney has devolved into a Middle Eastern-like organized crime environment. The watch list has jumped up from the American government, all these different things. And you know, it's bogus, it's social media. This is among the safest places on the planet. And you know, I get shot at here.
So what are some of the impacts around the breach industry? Come back to the top one at the end, right? So these are a lot of things, these things are obvious. Once you, I mean, we all have seen the not-for-profits. Credibility is the primary thing that you're driven by. Because if you need to have credibility to be able to say what you do and you deliver on what you say, that gets you funding, that gets you donations, that gets you credibility in the marketplace to be able to continue. That credibility flows into your government contracts. The government's going to start turning off money. They're already starting to do it with infrastructure. They're going to have to eventually change all the things, particularly if we go down to taxes. It all works in one cycle. Then there's a loss of donations. Some of that's happening in America, obviously, with social media issues as well at the moment and whatever else. And then that results in an overall viability. So you just can't do it all if you don't have the money, you don't have the contract, you don't have it all flows. Unusual one that we're probably just going to work through a high level case study, because as usual we got squeezed at the end. Is
No complaining.
yeah, is if you look at ChatGPT, right, it's owned by OpenAI. OpenAI this week has probably potentially committed the greatest destruction of value that could have ever occurred outside of Elon Musk buying X. They got an $80–90 billion business that they potentially destroyed and effectively gave on a plate to Microsoft by getting rid of the messiah of AI. And Altman, I don't think he was unhappy because he was going to earn a truckload of money and potentially be the next CEO of Microsoft. And they were just going to give that away effectively because they had some issues around the cycle, where they were going in it and what was profitable and what was not profitable and what was the right way to go about this life-changing, world-changing sort of thing. I would have loved to have seen it play out because the litigation would have been mind-boggling. And the employees would have actually sued the board, I would have thought, because although it is a technology which is built in a not-for-profit, it lives in the largest not-for-profit in the world, probably at the moment, or most valuable, 700 people. They effectively wanted the king out, and then the 700 foot soldiers said, we're out as well. That is not corporate governance. That is a disagreement at a board level, which was not thought through, and the unintended consequence was somebody, they didn't take any advice. They had no experts in the room. They just decided that was a good idea. And that's why it's so confusing. It's mind-boggling that you can make that decision without actually going through a process and a decision-making process. And that's where I always come back to risk management. It's about going through a decision-making process, thinking about the unintended consequences of what's going to happen, and making sure that you have a position which is logical and stands within your values.
So much of this all back around to credibility, your personal reputation. You talk about your board members. They're very interested in personal reputations. They typically get involved professionals not because they love the organization like the volunteers do. They get involved because this is going to be a good resume. Some yin and yang, some give and take for it, and they don't want that risk. You look at your donors. Again, they're looking to make sure that they feel good about your stewardship. Our bulk of the funds going toward the goal, where you're spending 75% of the money on travel and entertainment, trying to figure out what to do. 5%. All things that you see all over the place that cause a lack of credibility, cause the sophisticated, good people to run away screaming, much like politics, right? That's why we have such a hard time getting great people in politics, because it's a zero-sum game, and you find the best people sticking with.
We're not going to talk about 280-year-olds running for president.
No. The Q&A session later. But that reputational piece, that lack of credibility, all these things come around together to that risk management. Comes around to the jot and tittles of payroll. All of those things matter, and what we see is no different. I'm sure here with so many great nonprofits, as they start with people who have a passion for a cause, really good at that, but not necessarily so good at payroll or risk management or IT and cyber and those sorts of things. And that's where bringing in those professional board members just to supplement, not to replace, because you need the passion, but all of those things, pull together, or they don't. And to Sam Altman being fired and rehired.
64. So what are some of the things that we suggest around this? At a base level now, it's about protecting cash and making sure cash and all of those sort of things are done. Shared roles are really good at that, because then you've got two people looking at the same thing. You don't have the capability of one person being able to control all of the cash flow as much as some people like to. It's amazing how many times, and I'm sure that Marcus will tell you, a lot of these things that we see come out of somebody going, and it's because somebody new looks at it and goes, that doesn't make sense. And that's just the base one. And that's what we still get taught that in uni, I think, online. The review of your governance rules. So these things are changing. Everything is moving every day. So as fun as it is every quarter to sit down and think about your risk register and your governance rules, sometimes it's worthwhile having a discussion around that just to see if there are, talk about AI, talk about all these other things, and sort of work out whether it fits within what you do. Because it is interesting when you get into it. At a base level, it's all about understanding how you want to operate and understanding how you're all going to execute your roles. monthly checks on issues. I always like a bank rec and all those sort of things to make sure the cash is there. The faster you find something, the faster it is to be able to stop it. That's still not going to stop cyber issues, but that's a whole kettle of fish outside of that. Automation. Fiona's right. My wife's running a little business, which I get to be chief accountant for. And it is very, very simple once you set it up properly, but you've got to invest the time. It's a really good option to do that. Social media rules. Who's allowed to speak for the business? Who's allowed to make any comments around certain issues? Where does the line stop between being a board member or an employee and being an individual person? Good luck with that. We all struggle with it. It's all about balance. Chip will tell me that he tries in America to be able to understand what the correct issue is, and I might ask you to tell me how you work out what the reality of a position is.
So
On a news article.
yeah. So my go-to for figuring out what's happening in the world is I will hit CNN, I'll hit Fox News, I'll hit BBC, Al Jazeera's. And if they all agree on something, they'll say the same thing happened. I'm pretty sure that's fact. Otherwise, I got to figure out, in is what and all these different sorts of things. It is very difficult. You have so many different takes on the same thing. But when you do find that agreement, we laugh about it, but you do see it. There's so many things that go bad. I've got a great story we don't have time for on social media impacting a business when Black Lives Matter got activated by a random employee, and suddenly I had 45,000 Black Lives Matter people spamming our 800 number angrily. It was just $7 an hour employee who made a comment, tagged the company. Yeah, a lot of time and effort to deal with.
And you've got it in universities. The major universities are now losing donors, Jewish donors, because they're not liking the protest on site. And it just gets more complex. It's not going to get any easier. I just can't believe you didn't say two. Yes, I'm getting the wind up. So, questions. I'm happy to facilitate.
Talk about the difference in America, in particular, the pay scales. Saying that low pay scales are driving one level of fraud. And you're finding there's an element of entitlement increasing as the top end get richer, and therefore they're taking
So the rich would tell you it's
their
never.
hands in and taking it out.
Sorry, the rich would tell you it's never fraud, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's there.
It is a sliding scale. You're right. You see in IRS enforcement where the IRS they beat up on the little guys where they might spend freely sharing like $1,000 rather than beating up on somebody where there's potentially hundreds of millions extra. But you
Do
see.
they need some software?
Sorry.
Do they need some software?
Yeah, well, they have the software. They need to have the will to make the right decisions. A longer question and answer session, but your question though around the fraud side of things, that you do see desperation impacting the lower pay scales. You see greed impacting higher pay scales. And it's interesting because of those higher pay scales, to some extent, you're like, what else do you do with that money? I mean, you have so much already, but they still are taking opportunities to do this and do that. But
Because CEO rates are going up % per annum, problem, whereas the base rate hasn't moved for.
the real problem is this, right? So when gasoline prices go up, it impacts the poor. Well, they just drive whatever they drive. They don't care. When the milk price goes up, when the meat price goes up, it impacts the people with less money. That's where the impact is. When you talk about ESG issues, you're seeing a large revolt among the poor because they're like, I can't get to work. I can't afford a Tesla. I can buy a $1,500 gas guzzler. I can't buy a $50,000 Tesla or a $40,000 Volt.
And they don't have electricity. They don't have solar at home to be able to make it.
They're struggling to pay their electric bill as it is. They can't add something else to it. So you see this diversion of, the wealth and not wealth playing out in so many different ways. But you're exactly right. You see the desperation play out, and frankly, there's quite a few folks that we've caught committing fraud who've been kept on and then caught committing fraud again. And it's just purely out of desperation. It's purely out of literally the kids have to have clothes for school. They have to have milk. They have to have baby food. Diapers.
Anything for our other? Let's go on. There's got to be some Marcus questions.
Another question?
I think it's a really good point. I think it's something that will all probably have to be built into our audit at some stage. We'll need to have that as the process. Go with actually being able to review and make sure it's not underpaid, particularly if we get this legislation coming through. So it'll make it more consistent, then it'll make it easier to be.
Technical question, AI. So the Zero Mind Your Own Business, they're starting to look at backing their stuff up with sort of the AI end of that, feeding it in.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they have big investment going into it. All the software platforms are looking at it. They just can't keep up with the pace.
I think the best business that you've got to be in if you had the data sets. And I said, yeah, and I've had this, that being able to build the data that goes into an AI machine to be able to make sure that that's right, correct it, verify it, go through the 4 different versions of what you say, pump it all in. That's going to be valuable.
But then I saw more targeted at the payroll.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's AIing the payroll, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it can look at it and see mistakes might.
Yes. So in order to get a meaningful result from your AI algorithms, you need a really large data set. And at $70 billion, we're just getting to that point. So because if you look at OpenAI, they're taking the internet, like Reddit, Substack, all that sort of stuff. That's why a lot of the results are hallucinogenic in nature, if you've ever been on Reddit. But I think the large language models in payroll compliance, it's yet to be seen where they're actually going to land. So I know a couple of industry participants have tried feeding a model award in the top, which is written in legalese adjacent, and trying to make sense of that. The real challenge is going to be one of the real drivers of non-compliance is the fact that you might pay somebody weekly, but they have entitlements that accrue over 28 days. And so you don't actually know what they're going to do in the next 3 weeks. AI isn't a solution to that. We do a bit of machine learning and as to how we produce results, which just makes it more efficient. But ours is the non-sexy part of AI. It's the stuff that you can't see that works in the back end. But watch this space. We're doing a couple of parallel tests where we're running the traditional system and we're running the AI-powered system to see how close the results are. And at the moment, they're quite a distance away because the algorithm is still learning.
Thank you again for the people that participated. I tried to get my 100. I always try to get my 100. I just like that number. We were just under 100, but it's such a great, robust report. This is, as Aidan said, this is our 3rd year. Our next survey will be strategic planning, and that will come out in February, March next year. And again, I'd really love for you to participate in that. So that wraps up our presentation for today. Thank you so much. I'm going to look, I'll print a number of hard copies for people and then very happy to send them out. I do think, being a board member, being a chair, it's important that there's a document that you can share with your board. And emails, different for us, but I think that you can take something into a board meeting that has all of these statistics in it. I think it's a really good report that supports what you do in an organisation. And I think that's really important. And the strategic planning one certainly does. But the numbers talk for themselves, I think. So I'll do some hard copies. So the Christmas party, which I think is the event of the year, is on the 14th of December, and it's going to be here. We'd love to see you all. I'm sure we'll get lots and lots of other people. It'll be very festive. And thank you again for today. And thank you to our speakers. Thank you.